Welcome back to my ride from Iowa to DC, New York City, and Buffalo, New York. This video is about the recap summary of my 48 days, 2,500 mile trip. So my original plan was to finish up the ride through Iowa. Before, I had made a ride from Omaha all the way to my hometown in Ames, Iowa. And I wanted to always finish up that ride to the other side of the state. And when I started kind of looking at routes, I noticed once in the Quad Cities that there's a cool canal path, the Hennepin Canal Path. So I'm kind of eyeing like, hey, that would be really cool to write that as well. And so it connected on to the I&M Canal Path to Chicago, a path across Chicago and then down. There were so many rail trails that I found all the way to DC that 70% of my writing would be on trails and only 30% on the road. So that became really intriguing. The question was still, would I be able to ride such a long way distance to Washington, D.C.? Before, I just did 1 week bike rides. I never really had that momental experience of such a huge bike tour. On my week-long bike rides, it's kind of always were time locked in because of work and so on. So I had to quit even when I enjoyed it, like riding along the Oregon coast or the California coast. There were always definite endpoints where I needed to stop no matter what, how much fun I had. So now I had the opportunity that I wasn't time locked in. Also, I still didn't know whether or not such a long ride would be feasible for me to pull through. The cool part was I would be starting from my hometown. So the plan was basically just ride as far as I can. I'm not making a plan on how to get back yet from DC. There were some ideas. Hey, I could rent a car or fly back. Those were kind of my ideas as deep as I dived into it at this time. And having that enabled me to stop anywhere because I wouldn't waste a flight ticket from Washington, D.C. back home. Also, it didn't put me in a time window either that I had to get to Washington, D.C. at a certain time. So I could write as fast or as slow as I wanted. That also reflected on my overnight stays. I really didn't have a concrete plan on where to stay overnight. I saw on the C&O and Gap there were a lot of campgrounds. The same on the Hennepin Canal. There are also a lot of campgrounds. So I identified them. Some region I looked into warm showers. That's a network for cyclists to give other cyclists or friends of cyclists to give long distance cyclists a place to stay overnight in their home and a warm shower. So I looked if some of them are in those regions where camping wasn't possible, just kind of to get an idea of how the housing situation is. I did not go ahead and make any pre-arrangements on overnights or anything. The one thing that I did right in the beginning, and that's from the experience, is if I start my route right in the morning, I would end up in Marshalltown because I knew that route before already. I've been riding that in a day. And I didn't want to end up in Marshalltown just because I didn't know where to stay. I didn't want to stay in a hotel right away. Didn't have a place inside the town, and thought of wild camping would be easier outside of town. So my decision was to start midday and do wild camp along the Heart of Iowa Trail, primarily because the last section between Collins and Rhodes, after the road section, so this part here, is very rarely traveled. So there are not many people around, so wild camping would be quite feasible. And that's what I ended up doing actually, is I did wild camp on the Hoy Bridge, directly on the bridge, just because the bridge provided me a concrete foundation, because the trail there is really grassy and somewhat muddy. I really enjoyed being on the solid concrete surface. I was a little bit aware of, or worried of, do the local kids come there and hang out and party at night or something like that. So I was watching that a little bit and determined that that night at least it was fine to do just a wild camping. So that was my wild camping. The night was awesome. It was still early in the year, so there were a lot of mosquitoes. I had being on the bridge also kept me a little bit away from the trees, so that was a little bit helpful for reducing the mosquito. The night was a very clear star night. I remember that. You can hear the animals out there. There were like coyotes howling, cows were mooing, and so on. So it definitely wasn't a quiet night. You definitely hear the animals around. The next day, I went then on, rode up along the highway. There's a bike trail all the way into Marshalltown. Going through Marshalltown was really nice. I saw a lot of people walking on the trails. There was actually a tree down on the trail, as you can see in the video, that must just have come down that night. And then the park guy was coming to remove the tree, so I could actually go through there. So the timing there was awesome. Right up here on the park, I was doing my lunch break. And while I was doing my lunch break, I watched a guy. He had a girlfriend or girl or woman or whatever in the car, and he was working on the car with an electric drill on it. And there were some straps on the car. It was quite a sight. I don't know what they were doing. So I continued on my bike ride all the way up to this trail right here. And down here was, in the Grunding Center is where I stopped for the evening. I did kind of my meal eating and stuff like that in here. And then I was planning on riding down here. There was a rest area that I stopped at. It had a nice little shelter. The one thing that I wasn't aware of was, let's see, satellite. Right here is a pig farm, and the wind was coming from the south. So it was smelling quite a bit in there. And at that point, I wasn't totally sure, was it okay to sleep there or not? I was kind of thinking of wild camping. Then I saw a sign that there was another rest area further down, and there it was allowed to sleep. Actually, it was allowed to sleep at that one as well. So I went ahead and rode all the way down here and stayed overnight there. The shelter there was actually kind of nice too. What it didn't have was a toilet, although you could have gone around to the golf course. From here you could have accessed porta potty on the golf course, but I didn't need that. So I just slept out there. There was no smell from the cows. The one thing was, somehow some locals were driving around there, and there was a big tree on the other side where they kind of stopped, ran to to the tree and left again. I don't know if that tree was a bathroom or something else for those guys. But anyway, so the next day I continued on my ride. That was where I went up this trail. Here is a nice bike path again into Waterloo. Went across the Cedar River along this trail here. It was quite nice again. And that day I went into Brandon that had like a big frying pan. So I made a picture of myself with a frying pan. I was hoping that the city park would allow camping. I didn't quite figure out if they did or not, but I saw that the county park right over here was a campground where you could, it had electricity, so it was kind of a modern campground. So I decided to go over there. It was on a gravel road, and going across here, there was I think it was this turn here where the gravel road was really embanked to the side. And then on the high side, the wind also came. It was pretty tough to go through that gravel road because of the slope, of the side wind on top of it, and the loose gravel. So once I was up there, I quickly noticed that this campground did not have water. Well, they had electricity and primitive toilets. My problem was I did not carry water into the campground. I was thinking like, hey, if it has electricity, it's a modern or more modern campground, they will have water. But that was not the case. So at that point, I couldn't stay overnight here. So I went back into Brandon, filled up my water bladder, but I really did not want to go a third time across that road. That was just really tough with the loose gravel. So I decided, hey, I'm just going to go on the trail and maybe find a place where I could wild camp or so. And that's pretty much what I did. Trying to figure out where that was. I'm not really sure where it was. But on this trail somewhere, I stopped, cooked my dinner directly on the trail. It was still busy from people going by, somewhat busy, people going by. So I was thinking of, should I just like plain out sleep right on the trail, or right there is a mowed pasture field for hay, and the grass was like piled up for drying already. So I thought, and there I could go on that field and be behind the bushes and nobody would see me from the trail, so I could do some stealth camping there. And I finally decided to do that. So I went ahead, went over to the field, set up the tent while it was still bright. And as I finished setting up the tent, I looked over and I saw the farmer in the field just about to leave. He was checking on the hay, I think. And that was already in the evening. So I was quite surprised. So what to do in this case? Being nice, I just shouted over to him like, hey, is it okay if I sleep overnight here? And I got the okay on that. So that was awesome. And definitely no stealth camping anymore. But that was the story there. That, again, great night. And the next night I went on along this trail all the way to the end. And where was it? Around this area, I had a warm shower host that took me in and let me sleep at their place. So thank you very much for that. The next day I continued on. I went through West Branch, which I actually found quite interesting. I really have to go back there for the presidential library, and there are a lot of old houses to visit. So I definitely want to spend a little bit more time in that town. So I want to go back there and visit that. I did not go my original route here just to cut that ride a little bit shorter because I was doing that in one day. Initially, I was thinking of 2 days. Didn't quite had an overnight there. Also, I decided to get a hotel in Moline and do a 0 day there as well. So for 2 nights, I got in a hotel. It was a nice hotel right on the river. Pretty awesome. No problem taking the bike inside of it. And they have other guests apparently that have done that as well. It was a little bit on the more expensive side. So in order to justify that, I told my wife, "Hey, you want to come over and stay with me on my 0 day?" So she came over and visited me. She brought some spare stuff along in case I wanted to switch things out. Didn't do very much switching in the end. I thought the other bags would be a little bit higher because I had that problem of the bag touching the ground. Yeah, so I didn't really switch much out. I did send a tiny bit back with her that I had initially. So after one thing that did happen this route is I had definitely problems with my rear hurting extremely, and what just did not work was my biker shorts. I tried out the extra thick padded biker shorts and they did not help me at all. So once I started continue riding, I actually started riding without biking shorts, just with the merino wool briefs that I had. And that turned out to be a much better solution for it, at that time at least. So yeah, in Moline then I stocked up again on food and I started riding out here. I thought initially that I would encounter a steep hill because we are leaving the riverbed going to the canal, and it turned out it wasn't actually that steep. It was quite pleasant to ride out there. When I started again, because of my rear, I wasn't sure how many miles I could go. So I was thinking even of staying 2 nights along the Hennepin Canal or so, taking it easy. So that morning I just started out seeing how I felt about it, and just went how things turned out. On this route, two things that stick in my mind is rain cloud came through, and I did get a little bit rained on, but luckily I was able to find a shelter under an underpass. It was kind of one of those corrugated steel tunnel tubes that I stayed in. I should have stayed earlier just at the park where there was a picnic shelter. It would have been much nicer. I would have had to wait a little bit longer, and it wouldn't have gone quite as far, but it would have been much more comfortable than waiting out the storm in the tunnel underpass. But yeah, so I didn't get too wet there. Along that trail I also found Dahlia, the stuffed animal dragon that you saw in several of my videos. And another thing that happened after the rain was I kind of misnavigated. Let me see if we can find that somewhere. Oh yeah, right here. So right here I thought I needed to ride along this side instead of that side, and the path there was just grass and not very well mowed grass. It was really bumpy, and then all the way up somewhere here, I think that was when I found Dahlia over here. No, No, Dahlia was before, because my wife, so up there I noticed that I lost a bladder. Yeah, that was it. And somehow I contacted my wife about that. And she was mentioning, hey, in your last picture, you still had a bladder. So it shouldn't be that far. That was where I found Dahlia. So I was about just to keep on going and just write it off. But she kind of encouraged me and insisted, hey, go back and check where you lost it. So I went ahead and wrote back. And of course, I didn't find it when I got there. So I wrote all this bumpy grass area back again. And it was just horrible to write. And yes, it was right. Just at the beginning of the grass area, that's where I lost it. So I did find the water bladder and then went across the other side, which was a very nice path to ride along, and crossed over this bridge here and then on. So all was good in the end. But I had to ride this stupid grass area twice. That was kind of not so great, but oh well. One thing that I forgot to mention was, I think it was right here on that canal that I stayed overnight as well. Yeah. So that kind of added with that grass confusion thing on it. Then the ride continued on the IMP. Right, this is a road section going over to the IMP canal. That's again a nice trail to ride on. Gravel again, quite a few parts. It's more like single track gravel here. The canal scenery is not as interesting as the Hennepin because the IMP is much older. The Hennepin is one of the newer canals that was shut down, so the locks and aqueducts still are in much better shape than on this canal here. So where was that? Where I stayed overnight? Oh yeah, Staff Rock Park. That is where I stayed overnight, right here on that small little lake here. So there are a couple of camp sites that you can stay overnight. The very first one was somewhere over here that had a shelter, and then there's 3 other ones. This one was the furthest one toward Chicago, so the last one for me. It had a nice access to the lake. Some people came over there just to fish on the lake. I dipped into the water a bit to wash myself off. So that night I met 2 guys that came over, tried to fish. Of course, didn't have any luck because they were high on pot. That was kind of an interesting conversation there. The following day then was time to continue riding all the way to Chicago, south of Chicago. I had a warm shower host right here that I stayed with for the night. Also, there's a campground somewhere along here, I'm not totally sure where right now, that you could use as an other alternative option to stay there. It's right off the trail. It's kind of nice. It had water and a primitive shower, I think. The ride through Chicago was quite nice. There was some marks, closed part of the bike trail. There was some maintenance. It wasn't too bad. I still rode the closed bike trail. You could just, where they cut open the asphalt, you could just bypass it right on the shoulder of the bike trail. So that was, at that time at least, no problem to ride through it. There were other construction sites I tried to, and you get to it and it was definitely closed. You have to turn around and go some other places. That was later in my bike ride. But here I got lucky, and the ride really through here, Chicago Heights, was pretty awesome. Then we connected here on another trail into Indiana. And then right around this area, I had another warm shower that I stayed overnight with. So thank you again very much. Because it's always tough to find places to stay overnight in a big city. Continuing on, I was going more into Indiana, and I'm trying to think of where that was. Around here somewhere is the time zone change, and that was pretty interesting. I don't take medicine, but my phone reminded me like, hey, you changed to a time zone. You need to make adjustment for your medication. And the interesting part was it wasn't just once. I was riding along the time zone for quite a while, and it was like switching back and forth between the time zone. It was so crazy. I mean, all of my travel before where I went to a time zone, it was just like a car, airplane or so. You went to the time zone, it was a distinct, your time changed, done with. But here I was kind of in a limbo of time zone where you weren't even sure anymore, like, which time zone am I in right now? So that was kind of in an hour or 2 hours, seems like forever, where the phone just didn't quite know what time zone I was in, and it was going crazy. The other thing about time zone is me on the bike ride, you really orientate yourself more about the sun and things than the time. So me personally, the time zone change didn't change very much. I needed to go by, is it time to go to set up camp, to be ready to go to bed or not. On my bike computer always had the central time in it, so I never bothered changing it. And I just kind of adjusted how soon it gets darker on that part. Of course, yes, I still needed to have the local time when I was staying in towns and stuff like that, or talking to warm showers, what time to come and stuff like that. That is definitely in the local time, so you can't totally be ignorant about the local time. But it was really an interesting experience being around that time zone and experiencing that time zone change in that way, while personally you don't feel the change and things like that. Yeah, I mean, just interesting. A quick detail about the time zone. So here's the time zone map. The trail was going from North Judson to Aura, so it was fairly close to the time zone border that I rode my bike for quite a while. And during that time, the cell phones towers probably were switching from one tower to another several times or so. And it's a cell phone tower that determines the time zone that you're in. Another interesting part was Indiana. It was actually twice I did that right after each other. So right here in the beginning, and then I continued on further down somewhere here. I didn't have a place to stay, and really there wasn't too many options. So what I kind of tried out was looking for people that are out in their yard and just asking them if I could camp in their yard. That is not as easy as it sounds when I say that, because I'm not that outgoing, hesitant, shy about that. So it took me quite a bit of achievement to overcome that and go ahead and ask. And both times I had a great time when I was asking there. The first time I was seeing a woman out in their yard and stopped there and was saying like, hey, I'm riding my bike from Iowa to DC. could I stay in your backyard? I'm not totally sure if she even heard this stay in the backyard anymore, because she said right away, like, oh, wait, my husband needs to talk to you. So she went into the house, and after a while, her husband came out with some Gatorade, a Cliff Bar, and handed that to me. And I was asking him, like, would it be okay if I stay in your backyard, in your yard for the night with just a tent, and I will be leaving right away early in the morning? And he said, yeah, and he was asking me like, hey, do you want a chair? So he brought out a folding chair to my tent, and he was asking like, do you want power? And he ran an extension cord out to my tent as well. So it was like really crazy how helpful and nice that guy was. And the same thing on the second night. It was again out in Indiana, in the rural area. There was somebody out in their yard grilling, and I was just stopping to ask them if I would be okay, and it was also okay, and he invited me for a burger, and we ended up talking around a bonfire in the night a bit. So it was great, because it's always awesome to meet people, hear their experience, share my story, and that's really great, both in the warm showers as well as these surprise encounters. The trip continued on down to all these towns. There are so many memories. It's hard to mention all of them. I stayed overnight right here in a motel, and that turned out quite well actually, because in the morning when I got up, there was a rain front coming through, and I just decided to stay at the hotel a bit longer. It was like an hour or so that I stayed longer, and let the rain front go across me, so I could actually ride without being in the rain there. So that was perfect. So continued on to Dayton. Dayton, the entry down here, it goes directly on the waterfront. But the waterfront, to me, I don't know why, it just did not feel pleasing to me. As you saw in the videos, it just kind of looked like you're riding along the sewage water kind of thing. It wasn't that bad, but I don't know. It was kind of just not great. Once we were at the Mad River, it got nicer, the trail. And going all the way to Senior, the trail was much nicer. After Senior, I continued on, sorry, not me, to London. That was actually a pretty cool place, because London, right here on this side, on the trail, there was a campsite just for biker. I guess hikers would be okay too. Right there at the trailhead, they have a couple of tent pads. They have a bathroom right next by, and you just call in, let them know that you're camping there, and the campsite is free. That was really, really awesome. That was also the campsite where I met Todd for the first time. He was on a bike ride from Seattle to DC, so the same destination. And in the morning, I started a little bit earlier. I needed to get on the trail to make my miles. He was planning on getting some breakfast, coffee or something. And him being so much younger, I was sure that he would be faster than me and catch up to me, pass me, and be gone. And I wouldn't be able to keep up with him. So I continued on that trail. Riding on that trail, both the day before and the day after, was actually kind of nice. I had a little bit of tailwind, sorry. So I ended up in Columbus, and Todd wasn't passing me. So in Columbus, right along the trail, I found a restaurant where I could still see the street. So the restaurant just opened. It had like, I bought a salad and what was it, noodles and stuff. It was way too much. I bought a big meal. But I sat right on the window so I could see if Todd would be passing by or so. And my bike was out there visible too, so he would be able to see me that I'm in that restaurant. But didn't see him. So at that point, I gave up that I wouldn't be seeing him. Continued on. And my next stay was somewhere up here at the warm shower host again. And that was great, nice family. Then I continued on Mount Vernon. This is the area where the Amish settlements become more densely and the population becomes larger, the Amish population. And along there, the bike trail is really nice. Finally, the train stations were converted on the bike trail to, they had restrooms and water and things like that, much more like in Iowa. Before, on some of the bike trails, it was really hard to find water and bathrooms. Both of them were really, really rare, if at all existing. And so that was really nice to have that again available. One thing I found on this trail here is all the Amish people are riding electric bikes. And while it's so shocking to me, it must have been shocking to a lot of people, because when I stopped at a rest area, an Amish group was also stopping, and a young Amish guy was coming over to me and was talking to me and asking me, "Hey, where's your motor?" So obviously making the joke that everybody was always asking him about the e-bikes. Why are you riding e-bikes? So he was asking, oh, why don't I have a motor? The interesting part is I had my action camera on my bike. I wasn't using it or anything, but he right away identified, "Hey, you have a camera there, you're doing YouTube videos." So it's quite amazing how good of an eye they have for things, and they definitely don't live under a rock as we might be thinking on that. I continued on the bike ride along here in the Amish place. Later on, the trail stopped and I started riding streets. Where was that? I don't know, somewhere around here. The trail stops and you're riding streets. And I didn't really have a good place to stay overnight. And I was trying my luck again with asking just strangers on the road that were working in their garden. Of course, this is Amish country, so the stranger that I could talk to were only Amish people. So there was an Amish woman cleaning up raking their gravel on the driveway. So I asked her if I could stay overnight in their yard. And after explaining it a little bit more, they said okay to it. So I set up the tent in the yard. They had some neighbor or friends, family as well. So there were a whole bunch of kids there. So I just let them set up the tent actually for me. They kind of put together the poles and things. And that was really awesome to see them do that. They had a lot of fun on that. I talked a little bit with the Amish farmer there, both with the senior farmer and the younger one. Tried a little bit out to see if their Pennsylvanian Dutch is close enough to the current German to see if we could talk to each other. And it was definitely not close to High German. But when I go into the slang, the Southern German slang, the Swabian slang, and so on, that's much more closely related to the Pennsylvanian Dutch than the High German. So I definitely could understand a little bit, and it was still very hard to communicate though in German. So we ended up just talking in English to each other. It was really nice to talk to them, and definitely would love to have more interaction with them. But at the same time, I didn't want to be too intrusive. I really kept a low thing, not demanding much, just a little piece of grass. Went there to sleep, left there again. So yeah, breakfast and dinner. I never do that at some stranger's backyard when I ask there. It's just I want to be as little inconvenience as possible to them. So definitely don't want to make myself a burden. Then I continued on the Amish county. Later on, it kind of I forgot where it was. It would be still somewhere around here. Definitely, you kind of get out of the Amish section, and this was still a trail along here. Then where was that? I'm trying to think where that was. Hold on. Need to orientate myself. Yeah, 212. That's what I was looking for. The 212 road I needed to ride, and that was hilly, turny, and that definitely was the section where the traffic was the worst. There were just people passing me on a turn where they couldn't see, or where there was traffic coming ahead, not giving much room, or any room actually. There were 3 people that I would definitely say they did Russian roulette with how they drove. Yeah, not so great. Anyway, but later down here's somewhere, I'm not totally sure where it was. Oh, right. It was right here where I got some dinner from a restaurant. I met up with Todd again. So that was interesting to see that after 2 nights I would meet Todd again. I was expecting him to be way, way ahead of me, but he must have not gone all the bike path along the big route, but he crossed somehow this way over, and it's quite a bit hilly to go that way. So maybe that slowed him down or so, I don't know what. But that was pretty cool to see him again. He had a place that he found before. It was a campground out here that you could stay for free. So I decided to go along with him and stay at the campground. It was a bit tough to ride away from the bike, from this. Yeah, there was again a bike trail, from this bike trail, because you riding up into the hills and then down again. So it's a lot of up and downs that I was trying to avoid. So from then on, actually, Todd and I decided to ride together. It probably was more like Todd deciding to ride with me because he had to slow down, I assume. But all the way to DC, it was always us 2 together. This path here, again, is very hilly and not very enjoyable. You see us riding a little bit, exactly 1 exit on the US 22. I'm used to, for the US highways, to be okay to ride a bike on. Even the 4 lanes right here by my hometown, you can ride a bike on. There's no problem. But apparently you're not allowed to ride a bike on there. So when we got on the road, we missed that sign, and a police officer was telling us to get off the road. So we got off the road and rode back roads again. I think it was Reed Mills or Belvedere. Somewhere there was a gas station where we pulled over and got some food and drinks. And there was a local woman that was saying like, "Hey, aren't you the guy from News Channel 9 that goes to DC to demonstrate for something?" And I'm like, I don't have any clue. I was never on the TV. It wasn't me. But apparently there was some guy that was riding through the country at one point of time to DC to demonstrate for something. So we continued our ride down to Steubenville, over to the bridge right here in town that unfortunately was shut down, closed. So we couldn't take that bridge. The closest bridge to take would be this one down here. So you would have to ride quite a bit out of the way. And we didn't feel like it. We did find a shuttle that would take us across. So that's what we did. We met the shuttle driver right here. He took us across the bridge and we just asked him like, "Hey, can you just take us to the hotel where we stay?" And the hotel was over here, I think. So he took both of us over there and we stayed in the hotel. The next morning we kind of wanted to do a shortcut to the trail this way. We thought we could kind of, but ended up, nah, we can't. So we rode out here down to the trail. This was very steep down, which when I was riding down, I just like, oh God, we have to ride all that stuff up again, and was kind of depressed about the big upcoming hill. Little me did I know that this year was all just a rail trail, so it was all very gently up. So we didn't have any steep incline here. And the fact that we got the shuttle to the hotel and didn't have to go up that hill was really, really, really nice. So I'm really glad that we took the shuttle, or at least I took the shuttle, and didn't have to worry about that hill. It was really nice. This trail here is again awesome. Was really nice. The weird thing was the transition over to this other trail. I don't have all my trail names here. It doesn't say what trails they are, right? One is the Panhandle Trail, this one is the another trail. But to switch over the trail, you see this weird thing here. And on the maps, when you look at that, it has that weird thing as well. The reason for that is your trail goes underneath in the valley, and here you go up the hill and then you go over a big bridge over this whole valley around there. So it was pretty cool actually when you see that. Just when you aren't aware of what's going on, it's kind of weird that you can't just jump onto this trail right here where the intersection is, because it's just so many feet higher. So yeah. You see all of that in the videos, so I bet you saw that already. So we continued on the trail here, and right here, so we are in the southern part of Pittsburgh now. Here was a grocery store that we stopped by. This area is kind of the poor area of town, unfortunately. Both of us were a little bit more alert there, and we definitely took turns on going into the store just to keep an eye on our gear. Then we started here the Gap, that's the Gap Trail, and we ended up staying at the first campground somewhere around here that was for free. The campgrounds on the Gap are quite nice. They have shelters, fireplace, even wood on the fireplace, toilets. So the campgrounds are a little bit more apart from each other. There aren't as many as on the CNO, but they are definitely much nicer. So I really enjoyed that. We continued on the gap, trying to see. Yeah, right down here is the outflow campground. That's a paid campground. Initially, I thought it was a free one. We stayed overnight there the next night, and you saw us going into Confluence to get some food. So the next day on the gap was actually kind of interesting. Oh yeah, I just see this here. That is a good story. So on the gap, this section here was closed because there was apparently a landslide, and there was no official detour. Instead, people were recommending, or the detour was the shuttle. So there was a shuttle going for $20 that you could have take. We decided not to take the shuttle. So we went ahead and went up this road here, and right away it goes steep up. And that was so steep, I was pushing my bike quite soon. And it was kind of like 13% incline here or so. The van was actually coming by at that point and was asking like, hey, do you want to ride? And we declined, thinking like, it was probably down here where the van was. We were thinking like, we can just do this and we're going to be strong and push through it. We did not have a clue how bad that was going to be. But up here, we turned into a gravel path. There was another steep decline, 14%. I was slamming my brakes, both front and back, so hard, just going really, really slow down that hill just to keep the bike under control. Midway, I had to stop because it was just so hard to pull those brakes there that I just needed a rest and then continue on. And of course, that 14% down, it was 14% up on that gravel as well. I could not ride up there. So I pushed it up and finally got over there. Afterwards, you're kind of like, awesome. But I tell you, during the thing, you're like, no. We continued on this trail, the gap, down, where was that? Trying to orientate myself. Yeah, right here, I think, is that nice big bridge that you cross the valley. And it's awesome because you don't have to go down, don't have to go up. Really, everything on those rail trails were awesome, besides like detours like this one, where you have the hills, or over in eastern Ohio, where there was no trails and we had to ride streets. So yeah, that was that awesome bridge over the valley. That's just gorgeous. And then here is the tunnel that we went through, and that's also the Great Divide right here that you're going across. I nearly missed the Eastern Continental Divide, is that? And the Mason-Dixie line is right here too that you come across. So there's like so much packed in just this little section here. It's awesome, really crazy. So, and going down here was like, you have speed and stuff. That was like just great. The nice part going our direction is this here has like an incline of 1-2%. This area has a little bit higher incline of maybe 3-4%. I'm not totally sure on that, but yeah, it's definitely a little bit steeper on that way. Still much better than riding out on the roads, hilly roads. And really, to think of it, we crossed through the Appalachian Mountains, through all the mountains on that canal and the rail trail. How little effort you have to do, it's just amazing. The next night we tried just to stay south on Campbellland. That's now the C&O Canal on the trail, and that was right next to the railway depot. There was a train constantly going back and forth, and as it got dark, we're like, we're not gonna be able to sleep there. So just as it got dark, we decided to tear down the tent and go to the next campsite down the C&O and stayed overnight there. Was it better? I'm not totally sure, because just along the river, it seems like the train path always goes there. And so that night there were still quite a few of trains going past us. That is something that we had to get used to, I guess. So now on the C&O, it's kind of hard to know where all the campgrounds is all the way to Washington. So we slept 4 times. One was right up at Cumberland, and then the last night was right at the very end, the campground at the very end of the C&O. Couple things that were along the C&O. There's Cumberland. Somewhere there was a section where the canal actually goes through a mountain. That was pretty awesome. You saw that in the video where we go through the mountain with the canal right next to us, and even after the canal, the valley there was really, really awesome. Another thing that happened a couple nights was in the night when I got up to go to the bathroom, and early in the morning I was kind of dizzy, and it kind of felt like you're drunk also. Couldn't quite walk totally secure, a little stumbling there, and that kind of gave me some concern. Didn't mention anything about that, but was very aware of that and had a little worry about that. I didn't think that I was dehydrated, but I'm not totally sure what it was. Luckily, that went away later. It just was gone, and I could ride on no problem for the rest of my trips. So don't know what that was. Also, I did had some break there in Washington DC. So yeah, in Washington DC, that was awesome going in there. So we rode in there, just went straight from our trip on the C&O, passed through right the all the monument and the Capitol side. So we saw everything as we rode basically to our warm shower host. That was really downtown Washington DC, very nicely located as well. So wow, awesome warm shower. I mean, all of them were awesome. So we got to stay with them 2 nights, and so Todd could get ready for wrapping up his trip, and I could get ready for whatever I would be doing in Washington DC. We did ride down to Alexandria and further to Mount Vernon? Yeah, Mount Vernon. We didn't go into the museum, but we rode out there. Todd dipped his tire into the water. Since he wasn't going all the way to the Atlantic, that was as close to the Atlantic. It kind of is Atlantic water, so awesome. I kind of was eyeing of doing something more. I didn't decide until really I was in Washington that I wanted to continue on, and also what continuing on meant. I was thinking of going down south. Didn't really see a good path riding south along the coast inside. Didn't see much either. There were some people that were recommending a trail out in the mountains right here. So you would go up the C&O and then halfway and jump over there. It's very remote. It's gravel. It definitely sounds interesting, but at that point, really, I wasn't interested in riding a remote. I wanted to be more, not urban, but civilized, where I could go to stores, resupply, uh, and so on. Didn't quite want to go back on a gravel because the C&O was gravel. I had a lot of dust and stuff. So I kind of was hesitant and didn't want to. Initially, I was shying away from going north because in Ohio, there, oh yeah, especially around London, when we were staying there, the night in London got quite cool. It went into the mid 40s or lower 40s, I forgot. But it went into the cool temperatures where my equipment was getting to the border of what it could handle because I only had a 45-degree sleeping bag. The problem was right as I started, I just came out of a warm spell from Iowa and it just didn't click with me that it's going to get colder and I should have taken the next more warmer sleeping bag instead of the summer sleeping bag. So yeah, after the 2 nights, I transferred over to an Airbnb that was still in DC, not quite as nicely located. I don't think you could be located as awesome as that warm shower house was. It was still great to stay there. I didn't want to be too big of a burden and live with a warm shower hoist there all a whole week long. So I got the Airbnb. The reason why I did the Airbnb at that point, I knew already I wanted to continue on, and I wanted really to go to New York City. The weather was better than I think it was fine to go up to New York City, and I really wanted to take the coastal route, not really inside, just because, hey, I'm from Iowa, don't get the opportunity to see the coast very much. Sounds nostalgic, different, and stuff like that. So that's what my idea was. The big problem on that is the Bay Bridge. You cannot ride a bike across the Bay Bridge. I did try to see if there was a bike shuttle available or so. I couldn't find anything. Maybe I should just have called the normal taxi companies. I did find a warm shower on the other side of the Bay Bridge that was offering also shuttle rides, but they were out of country at that time and they would come later in. So that's why I stayed 3 additional days in Washington, D.C., because that was then basically getting to that warm shower host as they were getting back from their vacation. So thank you very much, guys, that you were so accommodating on such a busy schedule for you to host me right after vacation. So thanks. Staying in Washington longer was also nice. I just could experience the city more. I did some awesome stuff like on, was it Thursdays? Apparently in the Library of Congress, they often have some interesting events going on. So I went to the Library of Congress at the end of the day and saw that, hey, there was a ballroom dance going on. So I just kind of hang out there and watched them. A big band was playing there, yeah. And it was kind of, the theme was the 20s or so. And people were actually dressing up in costumes. And I have videos of that, right? You saw that. So that was pretty awesome. I also visited several other museums and things. So that was a great time in Washington, D.C. Then coming out of Washington, D.C., I was riding through some neighborhoods. I forgot where that was. It was like you'd ride down this path and there seems like all of the schools were lined on that. And the police was blocking off the traffic so students could easily go down that path and go to their schools. And I was riding there. That was pretty awesome. Later on, I forgot where that was. Was it around Annapolis? yeah, somewhere around, no, up here, I think, or so. Somewhere around there is where I saw that helicopter with the guy on a ladder flying in. And you're seeing, like, at first I thought that was some military training or so, some crazy thing. And to see a helicopter with a ladder underneath it and a person hanging on the ladder, it was pretty amazing. And you saw then the footage as well that I shot, how they replaced the insulator on the power line. So it was just awesome to see that. So got the ride over, crossed the Bay Bridge, stayed with the warm shower host. Again, a great night. Great time to talk to them. On this peninsula, that's a Delaware Peninsula or whatever that's called. So a new state there. Right here, I stayed at Here I stayed at a campground, the Killis Point State Park. I decided to splurge there and get an electric campsite instead of just the normal tent site that didn't have electricity. The reason for that was not really for the electricity. I just wanted to be close to a modern bathroom. On the other one, the bathroom was just a pit toilet, and I just wanted to have the luxury. And the electricity also gave me the chance of just doing some video editing on it and work on that stuff. The state park, both the Killis Point State Park and the next state park that I stayed at, they weren't cheap for camping, really. Camping is expensive when you pay for it. It's just crazy. It's like close to 50 bucks. You're kind of thinking, oh, I could stay in a hotel for that and get better amenities. So that's kind of why I often stayed away from paid camping, because those prices are kind of high and they kind of push into the hotel spectrum as well. So if you ride with somebody else, then definitely a hotel would be better than a state park, because you can share the room and the cost. Even though the state park, you would be sharing the cost too, I guess. But yeah, a single person having to pay that whole fee, it's not cheap. So Delaware, this peninsula was really interesting. I don't know, I was expecting something different. But what happened is it looked like there was like soy fields and corn fields just everywhere. And it just felt like I'm back in Iowa. And then from the Killis Point State Park, that was a Sunday again that I rode there. There were people riding some organized bike ride. So there was like a stream of bicyclists for a while passing me in the opposite direction. And one time I just turned around, rode up to the guy and was saying like, "Are we in Iowa? Is this right, Brian?" I'm not totally sure if he quite got that or not. Probably not, because I'm way too deep into my thoughts. But yeah, it was just kind of a weird vibe. So later down here, it became again back to, that's where the coastal scenery kind of started, and it felt a little bit non-Iowa-ish. So right here I stayed at Cape Henlope State Park, set up my tent, got there actually somewhat early, so that allowed me to go out on the beach, jump into the ocean for the first time, and take some pictures by the ocean with my bike and so on. Saw several military fortifications back from the Second World War, and it was just kind of, as I mentioned in the video, surprising to me that there were fortifications. I never thought of that Germany was that the US was concerned about Germany attacking. So yeah, me coming from Germany, I didn't didn't have that connection because the war was always over in Europe and in the Pacific. So interesting to see that, and kind of a wake-up call too, yeah. That it felt probably a little bit closer to home than I thought it would have in the US, especially on the coast. The next morning I took the ferry across from Lewis to Cape May Pond. I didn't tour the town. It's supposed to be a nice town, light tower and so on. I had a hard decision. Do I want to take a nice bike trail here or go along the coast? Seeing that I'm riding somewhat a lot of coast, I thought, I'm gonna do the bike trail there. It was a very nice rail to trail bike ride. Awesome. Nice. Yeah. I mean, scenery wise, you don't see the coast or anything like that. So it could have been anywhere. That's the only negative part about that. So I was definitely eager, and you could tell that in my videos, to see the coast. And when I got across here, yeah, it was a big deal for me. So here's where I finally got onto the coast and rode along. I tried to be as close to the coast so I see. Sometimes I was riding on the boardwalk. I'm not totally sure if that was always allowed or not. The good part was I was outside of the season, so there were not many people there. And it was pretty awesome to see. Ocean City is where I stayed overnight. This is a little bit closer than I was planning on. I could have gone a little bit further, but I found on Airbnb this room for really cheap. It was like $32 or so because it was off season, and really it was the opportunity that I just couldn't let go. I mean, I paid more for a campsite, and here I had a nice bed, shower and everything. So I just had to take that opportunity to stay here. Not totally sure what happened there on that GPS track. I did not go swimming, I can tell you that. Yeah, so when I was here, I was checking out the town a little bit too. The next day meant I had to go inland. So the issue there is on this road, you're not allowed to ride a bike across because that is the GSP Greenways Parkway. Garden State Parkway, that's it. Okay, Garden State Parkway, that's that road, the toll road all the way through New Jersey, is that right? Yeah, New Jersey. So that meant I have to go all the way through here. There was a nice bridge. You saw those videos. It was a really nice area to ride through, so it was really enjoyable. And then up to here along all the way over to Tom's River. There I stayed in Airbnb again with the host, and the host invited me to go with him to a burger place. Actually, I was asking where's a good burger place, and he was recommending one way down here. So it was kind of funny that we drive back here where I just was like, and I took like half a day to drive through just to eat a burger. It was so surreal to me to do such a crazy thing. And then the next day I got to ride again on the coastline. That was an overcast day, but very awesome day, really. I came here long and early enough that I could go out to Fort Hancock, see the light tower, all the military fortifications and the state park. It was a really nice ride out there. So it was awesome. I also went up to the Twin Light Towers because that's where Marconi did his CW experiment that really brought the wireless communication, showed off the wireless communication possibilities. So that was kind of a little bit of ham thing as well. So I made sure that I went up there. The interesting part was this hill was a steep hill and I rode the whole way. That's why you see some jags in there, because I rode into the driveway just to take a rest and went up there, rode there and drove there. It was very steep, took a lot of effort. Once I was up there, I was just standing there and just trying to breathe, getting my heart pump calm down again before I could go and to the side. It was pretty challenging. And as you can tell, I'm pretty proud that I made it up there. And then after that, I went over to the ferry, took the ferry across into New York City, which was nice. Up here on the light tower, I talked about it in the video where I could see the skyline a little bit and this bridge a little bit in the haze. And it didn't come out in the video very well at all. So took the ferry ride into New York, which was awesome because you're kind of going right there as the Miss Liberty and stuff like that, and you see just this New York skyline. So it's a really awesome way to enter New York by ferry. So New York, you see a lot of vehicles. I don't know what craziness was happening here. I stayed with a friend down in Manhattan. So that was awesome that I could stay with him. A really nice location. And we did a lot of things together, and I did some stuff on my own. I went to 2 shows. The first one was some Japanese kind of comedy kind of things or whatever. It wasn't quite up my alley. Then I did the burlesque show over in the Bronx. That was pretty neat. Definitely not something that I do every day. With my friend, we went to a bike ride just around town. I also on my own discovered the town a little bit. I went up on the High Line. Definitely a nice path to walk on. And on my last day, I already bought the tickets, not the tickets, sorry. I already booked the car to drive home from New York City. And on Sunday, my friend, I and one of his other friends went out to Tarrytown on the trail. This is the railroad, so the trail is right here. It's the the Empire State Trail. And then we took the train back into town. And I really saw the Empire State Trail, and I heard about it a lot being in New York City. And it goes all the way up to Buffalo. And at that point, I just really wanted to go. So I double checked, can I cancel my car reservation without owing any money? And I could. So I canceled my car reservation. And no, I first asked my wife if it was okay. Then I canceled my car reservation. And I was in for the next day to go up the Empire State Trail. So that meant that night I had to do that day, afternoon and night, had to do laundry, resupply, and go to that one show. So I was pretty busy. But yeah, then I went up the Empire State Trail. So the Empire State Trail, the hard part is there aren't many opportunities to sleep until you get to Albany. So what I did is I just cycled through. Again, I didn't have actually a solid plan, but I was cycling as far as I could and stay in a hotel. I was kind of wondering if I should stay somewhere around here, but I did make it all the way to, I cannot pronounce that, Poughkeepsie or so. I stayed there in a hotel, and that was pretty awesome. It was a long day though. It was nearly 100 miles going up there. The other awesomeness is crossing the Huron River on this pedestrian bridge. The pedestrian bridge is just so beautiful, and it's a really nice crossing. So that I enjoyed that quite a bit. The other awesomeness, unfortunately, it was like right in the morning too. I really could have used that push in the afternoon. Was I crossed the 2,000 mile mark right here. So I had my little celebration there. The day before I went out to eat and kind of got my treat there for reaching that mileage. And the day started out fine. There's a nice trail going here along, and it was, I forgot where it was. Somewhere on the videos I was mentioning it too, where it told me to go down into the town, but actually you could continue taking the trail around the town, and I think it was here, yeah, Rosedale. So you can take the trail around here, and that was where all of the caves from the mines were, and so on. I mean, just watch the video there. It's awesome. The rest of the day was a little bit harder. This was still okay. The day was dragging out a bit. It was a little bit harder roads there. It was okay. The hard part was staying. I was not going to be able to go all the way to Albany. So instead I stayed somewhere before that. There was, there might be, still is, an Airbnb host that built a platform back in their yard and let people sleep in their yard. And in their profile, they mention if he doesn't respond, and it's fine to stay there. And I did not get a response, so I never saw him also when I was staying there. So I stayed in the in the warm shower host backyard and overnight, even though I did never meet the guy, the owners. So thanks goes out to you guys. You really helped me. The one thing was, it was getting cold again. That's again one of the colder days. Being on a platform, it brings the wind in. It was tough. So I did notice that the temperature in the forecast was getting much colder than anticipated. So going forward, I was planning my next nights. I contacted Warm Showers to stay in their house because I just did not have the capabilities to go those nights. There was a night that was going into the 30s, and that was just not possible for me to do. So yeah, the next day I went through Albany and got onto the CNO. I forgot if it was the first day or the second day where I got to see Log 7. I think it was the first day, probably somewhere around here, where I got to see the working log that's really in action, and it was a joy for me, having gone by 3 canals already. All of them are inactive. Now to be on the Erie Canal, that's an active canal, and seeing the the logs in action, and there was even a boat coming through, so I got to see how the whole thing works, and you got to see it too in the video. So thanks to the log master that explained everything to me and let me take the video of that log. That was awesome. Yeah, so up here I stayed again with a warm shower host. That was again awesome. Thank you very much. And the next night, somewhere around here, I stayed with another warm shower host. That was another long day. I kind of too ambitious, I think. I had to ride 100 miles that day. Let's put it that way. That was a tough one. And trying to think. Yeah, then the next one was, I forgot where exactly it was. We went past here. Yeah, I forgot where it exactly was. I have to dig into that more. But I stayed along the canal. Actually, it wasn't a canal. It was a community that had their park set up for bikers. So I stayed there. There was some electricity and there was a toilet and it was free. It was great to stay there. That was only, oh wait, yeah, it was like right around, probably around here. Where was that? Oh, right here. Chicanago. Right here was where I stayed overnight in that community shelter that they set up specifically for bikers. So thank you very much. Before that, I swung by an Aldi right here and to eat. The next night, I continued on riding here through the town somewhere around here. I forgot where exactly it was. I stayed at a warm shower that had a cabin, and they let the cyclists stay in the cabin. So I did that. That was pretty awesome. Then finally I stayed at a town on the canal. I'm trying to think how far I went there. Oh, Backport was it. Right here you can stay by the canal if you want I didn't quite get that. There was like a shower that closes early at 6 o'clock or something like that, 9 o'clock or so, and then opens later. So if you don't pay, you don't have 24-hour access to the showers and the toilet. If you pay $5, then you have access to the shower and toilet 24 hours, and you have access to a pay wash machine and dryer, but you still have to pay for the wash machine and dryer. So I took up on that, stayed there. The campsite wasn't the most optimal thing. It was okay. I thought it would have been cooler. One thing that I always wanted to do, I wanted to camp more on the canal in the hopes that I would meet other cyclists. I saw a lot of cyclists going from west to east, so from Buffalo to Albany, and just thought like, hey, maybe I can connect with them in the evenings or so. But I stayed often in warm showers on the cold days, and the other days when I did camp, I was the only one there. So this night I was the only one. There was a boat also camping overnight, but they were on the boat doing their own thing. So there wasn't too much communication. Maybe I should have gone over to talk to them more about it. So yeah, that was my last night before I went to Niagara Falls. So that was a long ride, especially once I got away. No, actually, the whole day. It was a lot of headwinds. It was tough. And then once I got on that road was very busy. And by the time I got to Niagara Falls, a town in the US, I was not the greatest mood. You probably heard me if I have some videos on that. And I really needed to go to the bathroom there. And you're not in the greatest part of town, so I didn't quite feel like stopping at the gas stations because every gas station was also a pot sell place, and it just didn't give me the vibes. So I had to I rode all the way to the fall parks in the US, and then the first thing I made beeline to the bathroom. And then I checked out the falls from the US side, and then went over to the Canadian side, checked out the falls from the Canadian side, and went into my hotel and toured again Niagara Falls in Canada. Must say, as a tourist, the Canadian side is much nicer. The town is much nicer as a tourist. Really, it's night and day between Canada and the US. It's like a first world country and a second or third world country. The difference between those ones. To cross the bridge, I had to take the street to cross the Rainbow Bridge and pay $1 fee. I could not go where the pedestrians were walking. I was asking that, so that's something that comes later, because the next day I got up, it was guaranteed to rain, 100% rain. So in my mind, I just accepted that I'm gonna get wet, put all my rain gear in the hotel already, packed up the bike properly, and put the rain cover all over. So with that attitude, which really, really helped, I started riding out of Niagara Falls, took again a look at the falls, went along the Niagara Parkway, which is a beautiful road. And I just had the greatest time riding in the rain. Really, I really enjoyed that. I definitely did not want to ride through Niagara on the US side. It was awful to ride there. And when I came in, and in retrospective, I totally agree with that. It would not have been nice to ride along the streets. Probably the street isn't great either. I don't know. Maybe there's a path. I don't know. This Niagara Parkway was just so beautiful. And it was just basically me, rain, and a couple cars passing by. And I was riding all the way around here. Here I crossed the bridge because last time I needed to cross on the car side. So there I did the same thing. Went down where the cars went onto the bridge. And once I was on the bridge, I know it's like, I should probably have been on the pedestrian path. But at this point, there's a big barricade that I could not go on there. And once I was at the border entrance, there's some people that work at the border. They weren't really custom officials, but they were working there. They were like saying like, you're not supposed to be here. You're on the road. You're supposed to be on the bike lane. You're like, yeah, sorry, I said. And they got me to the right place. No big deal. Going through the custom was a breeze, really, even with the shutdown that we have in the US government. I had to wait a little bit for the officer to man the pedestrian entrance. I think that's probably totally normal. There are not that many pedestrians on weekdays, especially raining weekdays, crossing the bridge. So they don't have somebody stay there all the time. So once I was in there, I got to ride through Buffalo. Buffalo really reminded me to Niagara, US. Niagara Falls, US. Not very friendly to bikes. It was raining. It was still fine on the rain. At the end, I had to hit some big deep puddles, and I knew that my stuff in my front panniers would be wet. And it turned out, yeah, it was wet. It was a really deep puddle. I should have swerved it better also. But yeah, it was what it was. Going to the airport, yeah, there were no bike lanes or anything. So I was on the road. I was riding down this whole freaking loop around. People were behind me. They couldn't pass me because there was some construction too. Thinking back, I probably could have somehow crossed the parking lot, but it wasn't clear where I needed to go. So I just went with the traffic directions. And here I picked up my car to drive back to Iowa. So that was my ride in a summary here. Would I do it again? Definitely, definitely. I definitely wouldn't have wanted missed it. Would I do exactly the same ride again? Well, I did it once, so now I'm gonna do something else, obviously. But if I wouldn't have done it, definitely do it. It was an awesome, awesome ride. Amazing thing is, I really had awesome weather. Very, I was very lucky. I didn't get any flats, and I don't know. It was just great. If I would have had better weather, I might have even considered riding through Canada from Niagara Falls all the way to Detroit or so, something like that. I think that would have been cool. It was really cool to just be riding that little section in a foreign country in Canada. Riding across that area would even have been cooler. Of course, eventually I probably just keep on riding forever on the bike. So that the weather turned colder and I didn't have quite the equipment to continue on. Probably was good to encourage me to stop at some point. So it was a good ending point.